Hey there, friends. I want to take a minute to weigh in on the Daniel Penny case in New York City, where Daniel Penny choked out Jordan Neely for being aggressive on a train, threatening people, threatening people's lives, and essentially just being erratic, scaring a lot of the passengers on there. And again, Daniel Penny, you guys know the details of it, grabbed Jordan from behind, put him in a chokehold, along with two other guys, held him in place till law enforcement got there. And of course, he passed out 5 or so minutes into it. What I want to show you is apparently it's time to get some Christmas presents allocated for the Black Lives Matter movement, because they're not really happy, even based on the facts that have come out throughout this entire case. And real quick side note, I want to mention to everybody, if you notice, I have not made any comments on this until the trial is taking place. And it sounds like there's going to be some changes. They've dropped the top charge already, and I think tomorrow, on Monday, they're going to reveal whatever the verdict might be early this week. Again, the trial is over with. It's just a matter of the establishing the verdict at this point of what he may or may not be charged with. The jury is having some issues right now. Again, it's a long story. Look it up if you're interested. My biggest thing was, it doesn't matter even once the facts come out. When you have groups that have made their minds up prior to the trial even taking place, based on their own personal opinions, like the Black Lives Matter movement, they come out and they talk about things before the trial. And when the trial doesn't give them the result that they were looking for, that they wanted, then it gives them a chance to come out and fake this outrage as if systemic racism in America. I mean, it's just silly stuff. We know racism still exists in many different forms in America, many different races, including black people. Racism is not dead in the United States. But it's not the driving force, certainly not in the judicial system, that people on the Black Lives Matter movement make it out to be. It's just simply not. In fact, they have done a pretty good job, that whole movement, of making people, judges, juries, and all these folks so gun-shy of actually having a heavy hand towards anybody that might have any pigmentation in their skin, that they actually, I feel like, undercharge in many cases, because they're so afraid that their neighborhood's going to get burned down based on whatever they decide. So I think it's done just the opposite. While racism may still exist, I do feel like the court system, I don't have a lot of confidence in the court system to begin with, and it has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with corruption, right? And bad people being put in the wrong places. But let's make no mistake about it. We have to have a certain amount, at least on a really public case like this, a certain amount of confidence that when the facts come out, that a jury of peers, let's understand this, a jury of peers in New York, a super duper liberal city, who will certainly want to put Daniel Penny in jail if they have the chance. Believe me, this ain't a tainted jury in favor of Daniel Penny up there. I can promise you that. You guys all know that. So to me, he's at more of a disadvantage with a jury of his peers in New York City than he would most other courts in the United States. So if nothing else, there is a bias, and that bias would be against Daniel Penny in this case. What I want to do is I want to show you some fake outrage from some Black Lives Matter people. Again, speaking of Christmas, apparently they need to fill some stockings with some 80-inch televisions because they didn't get enough from the George Floyd riots. And now they're looking to somehow or another have another reason to riot. In fact, they even allude to the fact that, is that what it's going to take? Break some windows and burn some cars, right? I want you to see this from their own mouths and let you form your own opinion and let you see if you agree with these folks. And I'm breaking this up into segments, so you're going to have to be patient with me because I do have some individual comments after each little segment. Let me play these.
There was no way you could put 9 white people in a room that would find Daniel Penny guilty.
That's absolutely not true. If you break down the numbers of voting blocks out there, far more white people or left-leaning liberals out there who believe in the fake outrage and the fake cause of issues like this. Far more. This guy, to me, is offending a whole lot of left-leaning liberals that think just like he does by saying that you can't put 9 white people on a jury and convict Daniel Penny. And again, I have to repeat this, of all places in New York City? Are you kidding me? If there's anywhere you could get 9 white people to convict Daniel Penny, it's New York City.
And obviously you were looking for that one white supremacist holdout. That one holdout. Might have been more, but there was definitely one person in there that said, I'm not going to convict this white kid for killing that poor little mentally ill Negro piece of trash. Forgive my language, but I'm proving a point. This is how they think.
This is how they think? So this guy's an expert on white supremacists? Because I guess with his appearance, he's been successful in infiltrating the Klan and other white supremacist organizations, and he knows this from a first-hand experience and first-hand account, right? This guy is, again, just simply repeating stuff that he's already heard before, and they're talking about white supremacy, again, in New York City. Of course, we know it's the enclave of white supremacy, right? Dude, you are literally in the one area that you can get away with almost anything. And the court system in New York has proven that with taking away cash bail, with removing any kind of real accountability for people committing crimes across that city. That's why crime is so rampant, because they've removed that. Don't give me this that you don't know who those are committing the crimes. You know who that is committing the crimes out there. And you know that the court systems have become remarkably lenient over the last 4 or 5 years towards those same people.
Everyone has looked at the case. And those among you who say that Daniel Penny is innocent have racism and bias in your heart. If you look at the facts of this case, then you understand that Daniel Penny is guilty. But today, white supremacy got another victory. Today, the KKK, the Klansmen, the evil in America got another victory.
Oh my goodness. These people are really good. You know, these are all grifters, right? I mean, these are people who look at the Al Sharptons and those folks who have gotten rich over crying wolf over the years, and they want some of that. They want it for themselves, right? They want the $600,000, 5 of those houses out there, the $1 million homes out there. They want all this stuff that the Al Sharptons have grifted away from the stupid people in America for a very long time. That's why they do this. They don't believe that. If you put a lie detector test on these people, they'll never admit they're lying. But let's put them on a polygraph test and let's ask them these same things. It's going to be inconclusive, right? Because it's going to show that they're lying. And they're just going to say, oh, I'm nervous because a white supremacist must be conducting this test. It's all an act. It's all fake. These people know better. This is simply because their bank accounts are drying out because they can't manage their money. They get all this money in and then they piss it away on stupid stuff and they're left with nothing, so they have to drum up some other stupid thing and they pick a case that's pretty clear cut on what took place. Again, even doctors have said that that's not why the guy died, right? But they want to ignore those facts because it doesn't bring up the result that they wanted so desperately, because you have to enrage somebody in a fake way in order for the money to start rolling in again. And again, their bank accounts, because of mismanagement and piss poor managing of the funds that they have gotten that they never earned, those funds are going away.
We don't get justice in these buildings. They might throw us a crumb here and there, but we don't get justice in these buildings. And I dare you to show me a study or some case law to prove that, to disprove that.
You must be stupid, because there are studies in case law everywhere that will show you exactly that. That people in those buildings, regardless of the color of their skin, certainly get justice. If you don't know that case law and those studies exist, you are one of two things. You're ignoring it, or you're too stupid to read it. Because it does exist. And it's everywhere. So take the time to educate yourself before getting on screen and making a big fat fool out of yourself. Now, this next chick that I'm about to show you is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter New York. Equally faked, outraged. I would love to know if her house has been foreclosed on, because she's really needing some money right now. She's milking this one pretty hard.
I'm the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. I stand here heartbroken because I have to hug a father who knows that the murderer of his son will most likely go free, who has to look in the face of a jury that no matter the facts, no matter the expert witnesses, no matter the people yelling on that train that day to let Jordan go, you will kill him. They will not find a white man guilty of killing a black man in modern day America.
Really? I seem to remember you all burning businesses to the ground with St. George Floyd. Did you pay attention to that court? Were you just still on a high from all the rioting? Or did you actually pay attention to the court case that took place? Did you actually pay attention to the outcome of that trial? Because you just said that there's no way what happened in George Floyd trial could happen in modern day America, and it did happen. So again, were you on a riot high still and just didn't realize that you got the conviction that you were looking for at that time? Are you just trying to lie and deceive people who might send you money because of your fake outrage and ignorance?
America has not changed, and I hate to say it, it may never change. And people who keep asking, are we going to riot? Are we going to protest? Is that what's needed? Do glass have to break? Do cars have to burn for a black man to get justice in America? We can't show up with peace. We can't show up with facts. We can't show up with evidence and witness after witness. You give us nothing, and then you ask us to love this country. America hates black people, and we see it from that jury pool.
Oh, man. Dude. That's an entertainer right there. That person should be in Hollywood. Because to be able to summon up that kind of fake outrage, knowing the facts, and knowing what took place on that subway train, and to still be able to pull off that kind of performance, that's pretty good. I mean, I will give her credit. That is the performance of a lifetime in spite of all this, right? In spite of the facts. To sit there and look at the facts coming out left and right during the trial and still think, I'm going to go with that. That's my message, and I'm going to go with that. That's pretty remarkable. But you got to understand, especially folks leaning left, they pay attention to most of the legacy media and state-run medias out there, right? That's the beauty of people who are more center to right-leaning. They look at alternative medias like this channel, like X, for instance, like other places out there to get raw news so that they can make up their own mind instead of letting the mainstream media and the state-run media take the facts, mold them into their own message, and then spoon feed them to the dummies out there so they can say, look, here's what the news is, and I took the time to go ahead and mold it in a way that you can actually swallow it and that you're going to be okay with it. That's the problem. People like this either are too stupid to realize that people know better, or they're simply targeting the people out there to give them this kind of information because they know they're too lazy or too stupid to actually investigate and learn the facts on their own. So these little sound bites from these fools like this might actually get someone's attention because of those folks that are either too lazy or too stupid to do their own research to see if these people are in fact lying like they are. Now, a couple of quick things that I want to point out that apparently some of these people have missed, and maybe some of you guys have missed too, because again, I think when something happens up in New York City, because it is such an oddball place, kind of like a different country, I think even some of us don't pay a whole lot of attention to it, simply because we know we are never going to be there. But I wanted to show you this. Mother child hid behind stroller before deadly subway chokehold, court papers. So you had a mom that was hiding her own child from Jordan Neely because he actually commented that he was okay to go to jail that day. He was broke. He was talking about how he was homeless, took his jacket off, he slammed it on the ground, and he said, I'm okay with going to prison for the rest of my life. And he even made the comment that somebody's going to die today. So the verbal threats were already out there. Now, again, I understand this, guys. If you know me, if you watch this channel, you know I don't condone any kind of senseless acts of violence. But if you are going to threaten people, you have to be willing to accept the consequences. Whether it's verbal or when you throw your jacket on the ground and you start making eye contact with people after you've done that, people get scared into thinking that you are about to attack them, especially when you are telling them that somebody is about to die today. You can't do that and not expect something to happen. Now, again, I'm not saying that everyone should go throw someone in a chokehold because they think that they might do something bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, Penny was not the only person on this subway train that felt threatened. There were people that thought their lives were in danger and testified to that, right? And these were not all white people who were part of the Klan. One witness even described in her testimony of having fear of death and violence. In a request that the case be tossed out, lawyers for the defendant, Daniel Penny, drew on testimony from passengers who described their unease before Mr. Penny intervened. Now, unlike the Black Lives Matter people who were simply looking for money and don't really want any problems to change, because let's face it, if their little scam dries up, who's going to pay their bills? These people don't have real jobs, right? They just don't. I mean, they're literally grifters. They raise their voice to earn money. So they really don't want the problem to go away. I do. I care about people. I care about my fellow man, my fellow brother. I want people to get the help they need. In this case, I want to describe what I think part of the problem is. Did Jordan Neely need to be, did he need to die that day? I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. But circumstances happen along the way, and people go through the system, and the system spits them right back out again and does nothing with them. This guy was homeless. He had 42 prior arrests. Now, granted, I'm being fair here, a large portion of those prior arrests were jumping turnstiles at the subway, drug-related charges, and things of that nature. I think there were only 3, not that this is okay, I'm not condoning this, but out of the 42 arrests, I think 3 were assault-related cases. So the guy did have a history of violence. So, I mean, this was not like some guy that just sold Girl Scout cookies all the time. The dude did have that. I just don't want to give the impression that there were 42 arrests and they were all violent in nature. They were not. 3 of them were. The rest of them were more petty type stuff. But this was a drug abuser. This was also a homeless guy, right? Very important that we understand that. I have found that nobody is doing anything since we got rid of mental hospitals to try to help people out. What happens is a lot of the mentally unstable people out there end up, well, I mean, if you have gender dysphoria, you end up getting a job with the federal government. That's a whole different story. But a lot of the other mentally unstable people end up finding themselves on the streets and being homeless. If you look at the alarming rate of homeless people out there, in many cases, that's our mentally ill people who used to be part of mental institutions. Now, granted, I'm going to go into a little bit of discussion about mental institutions. I recognize very much so that they were very much abused in a whole lot of cases. And I mean, there's mental institutions that they have found people buried in the backyard, that passed away or that they may have actually murdered. And those were hidden over time. A lot of these people, when they go into mental institutions, sometimes the families either die off or they just forget about them. So, in other words, the problem's taken care of, somebody else's problem. But mental institutions of old were always, in many cases, abused. I shouldn't say always, that's generalizing and that's not fair. In many cases, they were abused and the people in them were abused as well. Problem is, they all went away. By not having a place where the mentally unfit can receive adequate housing, adequate meals, adequate care, whether it be hygiene or medical, we put them out on the street. They become a problem. And in some cases, they reach a point of no return, and that may have been the case in Jordan Neely. Am I saying that it's okay what he did, trying to threaten other people's lives? I'm not stating that. I'm telling you how we got here. And in many cases, the people who need help that end up getting pushed to that point, they're not receiving help. Giving them a free bowl of soup every other day from a homeless shelter is not getting them the help that they need. And you guys know me, I am not about handouts. But able-bodied people should take care of themselves. When you have people who are not capable of taking care of themselves, at some point, without abusing that system, those people need to be helped, and they're not in today's society. Speaking of Neely, the New York Times reported that Neely was on a list of the top 50 sheltered or homeless, quote, high-need individuals to be reached by New York City outreach workers at the time of his death. He bounced around shelters that had been criticized for their poor conditions and had also been hospitalized several times. The Department of Social Services, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and the New York Police Department declined to comment further on Neely's case and why the efforts to contact or address Neely's needs did not work. So again, we have all these organizations involved. All of them know about him. He passed through their system and he gets spit out again. At what point do we realize that the system is failing these people? Again, I'm not condoning anybody's actions. I'm telling you that everybody has a limit. And sometimes you push these people to a limit because mentally they are not capable of taking care of themselves. Do I feel bad for him because he was a drug addict? Of course I don't. That is a choice that he made along the way. But if he had true mental issues and was not capable of taking care of himself and seeing that he was healthy and fit and mentally stable with a job and with a place to stay and all that, at some point we can't just discard these people and throw them out if they truly have a mental condition. I want to make this point very clear. If somebody makes the choice to get on drugs and they become a wasteoid because they're on drugs, I have very little sympathy for you. But there are mental conditions that exist out there with people who are not capable of making everyday decisions. And sometimes their family members either die off or they cast them out. That is a problem because these people cannot take care of themselves. They can't make the right decisions. Their house might burn down around them, or their apartment might burn down around them because they don't know how to address the basic fundamental things that many of us take for granted in making these types of daily decisions. Now, I want to make this final point, and people have their opinions of me, but if there's one thing that I can take a little bit of joy in is the fact that I do speak what's on my mind. Sometimes you're not going to agree with it, and I'm okay with that because that's the beauty of living in America. We can all think a certain way, and we don't have to agree 100% of the time. I have friends of mine who have 90% beliefs that we share, but that 10% we vehemently disagree. And that's okay. It's all right for you. I still think it's a mental disorder to be a liberal, honestly. I'm being honest here. But I can have things in common with a liberal, very few things, but I can have some things in common with them and still not vote the way they vote, and they don't vote the way I vote. So these things are okay. What I'm telling you is, when those mental hospitals went away, because of how they went away, they were never looked at again as being a viable option to reintroduce into society. And I think we have to take a long, hard look on that. I want to show you some stuff. I've done a lot of research over the years on mental hospitals. I mean, guys, if you don't know this, I have a special needs son. And at some point, my son will not be able to live on his own. I don't want him to be one of these homeless out there who cannot make a decision. My son doesn't even understand danger. So if he was standing in a road and a car was speeding at him, he wouldn't even bother to get out of the way. Those are the kind of people that still need help, and not to that extreme. My son is on the extreme end of that. There are people with similar issues like that aren't quite so extreme that still need help. Let me explain the mental hospital issue, and I found some pretty good information here, and I'll probably do more videos on this later on so you guys can see. I truly care. My heart goes out to these people. There are people that need help. I'm not talking about able-bodied people and able-minded people who can do things. I'm not talking about the guy sitting on his fat ass on the couch right now who doesn't want to get up to work because he says, I want to be on disability. Well, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who need help. I found this article on the AMA Journal of Ethics, Illuminating the Art of Medicine. And I want you to see this. This is speaking of the hospitals for mentally ill. Perhaps the most important change in the federal law was the introduction of Medicaid, which shifted funding for people with SMI in state hospitals, that's people who need that care, in state hospitals, from the state's responsibility to a shared partnership with the federal government. Here we go with the federal government getting involved in state issues and screwing them up. This created an incentive for states to close the facilities they funded on their own and move patients into community hospitals and nursing homes partially paid for by Medicaid and the federal government. When the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1981, the federal government ended direct federal funding for community-based nursing homes that primarily treated patients with mental health problems and required the screening of patients entering nursing homes to assure they had legitimate medical illness. Here we go. It required states to return to funding non-nursing homes for the long-term care of people with SMI in the community. Again, these are people that require medical help. Basically segregating many people with SMI into large, underfunded facilities. These facilities were often for-profit and privately owned, creating incentive to reduce costs and care in the name of profits. So once again, the federal government gets involved and says, all right, now guess what? We have to have this set of guidelines now to determine if we're going to earmark this federal funding for that person who clearly has a mental issue. But now we need them to go through this series of tests in order to do it. So essentially the states got to a point where they said, well, I mean, if the federal government is going to fund these programs, then let them fund it instead of us states doing it. And by the way, you can be rest assured that now the states were not going to be receiving their own tax dollars that the federal government took from them and then gave back to them to help pay for that. Now they were just going to withhold that funding. So these mental hospitals dried up. Now there's a lot of other politics that took place during that time also. But this is a perfect example of greed. Naturally, money became an issue. And people realized that it was too expensive to help people that needed help. And if these types of issues with those family members did not affect you directly, it wasn't your problem because it was out of sight, out of mind. We have to take a hard look and go back and look at what it's going to take. We've seen it long enough. Enough records have come out with people with mental issues. We could take all the data, find out where the corruption was in these mental hospitals, find out all the things that were done wrong. And look, let's be honest, the things that were done right too. There were some things that were done right. I'm sure there were some mental hospitals out there that did a fabulous job. Find out what those things were. Explore the best practices out there for those people. And again, let's make a long list of the things that were done wrong and look at taking departments like the ATF who do nothing but harass people, take their $1.6 or $1.9 billion a year, and let's bust that up and look at creating new mental hospitals out there that have the proper amount of oversight. And what I mean by oversight, I don't mean some former congressman or former senator who now sits on a board and makes $200,000 or $300,000 a year in order to sit on that board to manage the money and let the corruption continue to happen. You know the right way to do that? If you want to put together the proper oversight on any kind of a board like that, you put people in it that have skin in the game. If you're going to create a federal, and I can't believe I'm even suggesting this, but I am, under these conditions, if you create a federal department to oversee the mental hospitals, don't just stick it up under the CDC or somebody else. Create an organization that their own responsibility, the only responsibility they have, is to oversee the proper implementation of the care needed for these people. What you do is you take 20% of that federal board that's going to oversee that. 20% of the people who are going to sit on that board have to have some kind of skin in the game. What do I mean by that? They have to have a family member or somebody very close to them that they're responsible for taking care of who would be a candidate to be in one of these hospitals. You want somebody who needs to see what the wants and needs are of these people. You need somebody that understands that. If you have nobody that has any connection to somebody who needs to receive that kind of care, they don't know what they need. They don't know what they don't need. They don't know the things to look out for. I know that if my son were sitting in a room in one of these mental institutions and the hospital, mental hospital, began to burn down around him, my son doesn't understand danger. My son would sit in his bed while the building burned down around him until it killed him. He wouldn't run for help. He wouldn't run looking for cover. He certainly wouldn't know what a fire extinguisher is. He doesn't know to go tell somebody. The building's on fire. It's burning down. He doesn't have that. If I were on that board, I can tell them. You can't just leave it up to people to understand when the building is burning down. You have to run for help. Go get those people and save them. They're not capable of saving themselves. And then with that same board that you have 20% of the people, I'm talking about at the federal level, 20% of those board members have to be people who have skin in the game, with family members who would need to attend those hospitals. At the local level, when you have those hospitals that are established and opened up, same thing. You have someone, 20% of that board must be. I don't care what their educational background is. That has nothing to do with why they would be selected to be on this board. You choose 20% of the people on that local board to sit on that board and be paid. Let it be a paying job, or else they're not going to care. Let it be a paying job that they don't want to lose, where they have equal leverage as 80% of that board. I don't mean the 20% can outweigh the 80. But each person on that board has the same amount of say as far as what can or can't happen. So they're weighted just as equally as anybody else who is maybe a, quote, professional in the mental institution world or whatever. But have people there that can say, this has happened to my child before. I've seen this happen to my child or my family member, my dad, my mom. You know, we're talking about dementia patients and all that too here, guys. We're not talking about just people who grow up with some kind of a mental condition. We're talking about a plethora of people out there who have things wrong with them and they cannot make up their own decisions to take care of themselves. This type of stuff is huge. And you want to talk about, I mentioned the ATF. You want to talk about a reduction in what they claim? They claim to be trying to prevent firearm-related deaths. There's part of your problem right there. Take all your school shooters, all your, quote, mass shooters. Take all those people. Look at them and see, had they been receiving the type of help that they needed in a hospital, would they have ever pulled that trigger and made that decision? So we immediately solve most of the ATF's problems right off the bat by creating this. So it's an easy justification to take their $1.6 billion a year or $1.9 billion a year and create these hospitals in this type of climate where we can finally start taking care of other Americans who cannot take care of themselves. And instead of sitting here crying and whining about racism, maybe we actually enact some change and put something in effect that truly helps people instead of just helping you pay your mortgage on your $1 million home.
I don't understand the point that you're making.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.